Join us in our latest episode of Grow Science, where we interview Shailesh Manjrekar. Shailesh is a CMO of CloudFabrix, an AIOps company, a startup veteran who's been a part of 6 exits, and a member of the Forbes Technology Council. In this interview, Shailesh discusses the impact of AI on business, tips to grow your business, and the importance of getting customer feedback in order to really understand what they need. I hope you enjoy this interview and find it as informative as I did. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. It's been absolutely a pleasure to be here. Looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So, I'm looking at your background. I'm very interested to hear what you have to share. So, just to jump in here, could you just tell us a little about CloudFabrix and your background?
Yeah, absolutely. So CloudFabrix is actually an AI ops and an observability company. And what that really means is leveraging artificial intelligence to solve IT operational challenges, right? Glean insights into the operational intelligence aspect and so on. We've been around since, from a go-to-market perspective, 2017, about 100 people company. The founding team is a stellar team. It's a bunch of serial entrepreneurs. This is our 4th startup. So the founding team have sold previous 3 startups to Cisco, right? And the last one was actually Cloudflare, which has now morphed into a business unit by itself. So we've been in this business of, understanding, how we can enrich our stakeholders or value holders as well as the customers, right? Build products and build business units, which can benefit, thousands and thousands of customers. So that's kind of the background of the company. We are now, in a phase of what we consider as really a hockey stick phase. So getting a lot of traction. So our go-to-market primarily depends on 2 particular channels. One is, OEM-led and channel-led, right? We have a small overlay sales team, but those are the primarily growth channels for us. So we'll talk more about that, and particularly for me, so I've been in the industry for almost 25 years, looked at, the good, bad, and ugly, right? So been with a lot of large companies as well as small startups as well. So this is, I think, my 4th startup in a row. My previous startup, I was the head of AI. We sold it to NVIDIA, right? So I come from a deep learning and a GPU background, right? And I saw this opportunity of applying AI to really IT operations, which has a broader kind of TAM. And that's what kind of, drove me towards CloudFabrix.
Okay, terrific. That's great. Could you just dive in? We talked a little bit about this, but I think it'd be great to share with our audience. What is AIOps?
Yeah, so AI ops, as I said, is primarily leveraging AI for the betterment of IT operations. And what that means is, so IT operations has been a lifelong challenge, right? And it's a very formidable challenge, okay? And the practitioners as well as the CIOs have always been on the lookout of, hey, how can I kind of solve this problem? And now, particularly IT becoming a more of a profit center than a cost center, right? It has become really come out to be on the forefront. And what AI ops really does is, so there are multiple phases through, you reach your holy grail, which is really an autonomous enterprise, right? Where, a lot of things are autonomously taken care of. But in order to get there, it's a journey, right? So you got to go through what we call a descriptive phase, just understanding, hey, what is that I really have, right, in my data center, to a diagnostic phase where you're more like finding out root causes and so on, to being able to get to a predictive phase where you're doing really an what if analysis, right? And that's where AI is extremely, extremely good at. But then going even a step further beyond that, what we call prescriptive stage, that, hey, now you know your what if analysis, but what's the action I can take, right? And presumably take that autonomously, but if need be, you can always have a human loop in the process, right? But that's kind of the journey of what we call as AI operations, right? And now, obviously, there is an adjoining kind of phrase you'll hear, which is about observability, right? And traditionally, IT operations has been more more static in nature, that, static dashboards and you're asking static questions and so
Right.
on. That's changing very fast with observability, right? So observability is all about being able to ask questions which were not foreseen before, right? So whether they are at an infrastructure level, they are at an application level, whether they're at business level, and look at the things holistically across what we call the full stack, right? So these two areas are coming together, and really our claim to fame or our major innovation as CloudFabrix is being able to bring these operational domains together, right? So there were operational silos, whether it is observability, whether it is security, whether it is networking, but they're converging around data.
Right.
And that's what CloudFabrix, the building block platform, what we call the data fabric, does extremely well. And then we build upon services on top of that, right? So
Okay.
hopefully that answers your question, Ben.
Yeah, no, that's terrific. I mean, I imagine this is a terrific use case for AI, having these billions of points of data, and be able to understand what it actually means for the IT operations for an organization.
Absolutely, absolutely. Data is really at the heart of AI.
So you're a chief marketing officer. Do you have any keys to growth for a business based on your experience?
Well, yeah. So, I mean, one thing if I were to point out, all right. So, really, there are several kind of metrics you got to look at, right, for growth. You got to make sure there's a good product market fit, right? The
Mhm.
market is big enough that hey, there is enough to make, right? It's not very niche oriented. It's big enough that you can make money. Uh,
Right.
uh, Most importantly, I mean, if I were to pinpoint one thing which startups need to know extremely well, is your customer,
Right.
right? So unless you know your customer, I mean, very intimately know your customer, right? I mean, what is his problem? What is he facing on a day-to-day basis? What is he facing 2 years down the road, right? Is that problem big enough that the customer is willing to pay for it, right? And it's not just enough to understand that, right? What are his buying patterns, right?
Right.
How does he buy? Does he buy from marketplace? Does he buy from, and B2B seller, right? Does he buy from a GSI, right? So knowing your customer and your market extremely well is extremely key, right, for growth. And a third, I would say is the most important thing is a lot of startups fall into this pitfall of, hey, I have technologically advanced product, right? I don't need to do anything. It will sell by itself, right?
Right.
And that never happens, right? I mean, I've actually had real life experience with quite a few startups in my career, right? So I worked with, at least I've had 6 exits, right? And not all of them have been top class exits, right? So some of them were fire sales, and primarily because this particular understanding that, hey, you really need to understand the market and how to reach that market, right? And how to reach that buyer, right? So
Right.
that's extremely, and that's where go to market and marketing comes, right? And then, as I said, your buyer has changed, right? It's not the same buyer whom used to buy before from the traditional days, right? I mean, now you hear concepts around product-led growth and,
Right.
PQLs, product qualified leads, right? SaaS marketing is altogether different than the traditional marketing. So
Mhm.
understanding all of these aspects in the market trends is extremely important. But
And
since
you talk about the understanding your customer very, very well. Do you have any recommendations or any things you've done in the past to help understand your customer needs and how you can address them?
Yeah, so it's all about, use every opportunity you can get to talk to customers, right?
Mhm.
Whether they are your potential customers or whether they are just customers from that particular market segment, right? Leverage, every opportunity, whether you are, at a trade show, whether you are doing, webinars, right? Or whether you are just kind of, getting to understand your customer, right? So use every opportunity and talk to them as to, I mean, sometimes they can articulate their problems, not so much the solution,
Right.
right? But understanding that problem statement and how big of that problem statement it is really is very important, right? I mean, you could develop a product which is kind of an, it can be an multivitamin or it can be an aspirin,
Hmm.
right? So it's important to know that, right? I mean, multivitamins, I mean, it's good, it's good to have kind of a thing versus aspirin when you have a headache, you really need that antidote, right? So it's important to understand all of these things. So yeah, I
Right.
mean, again, there is no one single rule I apply, but I always, I'm always ready to jump on a call, on a webinar, right? At every opportunity to talk to
Right.
the customer.
Yeah, those conversations are so important, and I think it's something that you can't always pick up just out of the data. You actually have to have those conversations with your prospects and customers to really understand what they need.
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah.
Well, you've had a lot of experience with machine learning and AI. What do you see? And I think you're kind of in a unique position here, being a CMO, but also knowing so much about this. What do you see the impacts of AI over the next year and over, the next 3 to 5 years on marketing?
Yeah, well, so AI in general is going to have a profound impact, right?
Mhm.
I mean, the way you work, the way you live, the way you play, and so on, right? I mean, we have heard it. It's become a cliche to say that, really, right? But to me, AI is really a means to an end,
Hmm.
right? So AI by itself, I mean, your business fundamentals don't really change, right?
Right.
And if you look at the business, there are two parts to it to simplify, right? So one is building an innovative product and then selling an innovative product, right?
Hmm.
And in both the cases, AI becomes an extremely, extremely formidable tool, right, to accomplish those goals. Okay.
Right.
And you clearly seeing, how you're building the product and how you're leveraging AI to democratize that product. For example, I mean, just to give you an example, so AIOps and observability used to be, restricted to practitioners, right?
Right.
But that's not going to broaden your reach, really, right? Or your TAM for that matter. So how do you democratize that, right? And Gen AI has been able to do that, generative AI, right? So now just using conversational queries, right, you're able to glean insights into the data at hand, right? Which you would probably needed, the practitioners to kind of spend days and weeks together to get to them, right? So now you want a citizen developer, as we call them, right? So people who are they're not very domain kind of knowledgeable, right? But they can glean insights and so on. So that's one aspect of how a Gen AI and AI is kind of changing from an innovation perspective. When it comes to marketing, obviously the AI is getting applied at several different levels within marketing, right? Being able to, as I said, leverage those conversational queries, right, or
Hmm.
conversational AI, right, being able to interact a lot more with the customer, right, whether it is using virtual bots or chat
Right.
bots, right, even technologies like AR and right, augmented reality and virtual reality now is playing a big role, being able to create that, your path from what they call, right, typically you call
Right.
misery to your really accelerated state, right?
Right.
Where you don't have that misery, right? But yeah, I mean, so again, to me, but however, right? So AI, look at AI as a tool, right? And clearly it has, I mean, it has its formidable benefits, right? Absolutely formidable benefit, but it also depends on, the data at hand, right?
Right.
What is the predictability of the AI? What is the accuracy of the AI? How are you leveraging ethics and biases within that AI,
Right.
AI channels and so on, right? So that's how I would characterize AI.
No, that's interesting. I mean, the idea of democratizing tasks that otherwise was just, the domain of practitioners. I think that's really interesting. And you can kind of see, even from my perspective, where I'm using the generative AI, but it's not something that's, fundamental to my job. But you can start seeing that where it's giving people access that just didn't have the knowledge before, in a meaningful way. I think it's a really interesting perspective.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely, and it certainly is going to have a profound impact on next 2, 3 years.
Right. On the flip side, so you've done this quite a few times. Is there anything that you see that really keeps a company from growing successfully?
Yeah, so I think again, it's important to understand those key metrics, right? When you're particularly in the growth phase, right? Clearly, the product market fit aspect of it, right? Is there a big enough market? Is the problem you're actually solving? Are customers willing to pay for it, right? What are your go-to-market channels? Extremely important, right? Because
Right.
scalability at a certain point, and we are at that point, right, where we are expecting now and hockey stick growth, right? And how do you leverage not just your teams but your ecosystem, right? The OEM relationships, the GSI relationships, right? To be able to amplify your message, right? Amplify the reach, right? Amplify the solving of your problems for your end customers, right? All of this while keeping that end customer uh, inside, right?
Right.
Because that's what no matter what channels you're using, that's the persona whom you're eventually going to sell,
Right.
right? Yeah, and even simple things like, I mean, a lot of this, what a lot of founders and a lot of startups fail to understand that, hey, there are so many channels. Like if you look at now marketplaces, AWS marketplace has evolved so much, right? I mean, it's absolutely paramount for a SaaS company to have a marketplace listing, leverage all of these levers, what marketplaces have, things like
Right.
enterprise discounted programs, right? Or what they call EDP, or what they call private offers, right? So it's a different sales motion altogether, right? I mean, gone are the days where you are dealing, 3 months, 6 months down the
Right.
lane with procurement folks, right? Trying to convince them, right? And now you are actually selling to the buyer.
Right.
So
And
yeah.
and so the buyer's journey has really significantly changed from what it used to be.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, that is my one takeaway, right? I mean, if you look at how things have changed, the sales motion, your buyer has significantly changed, right? He's a lot more empowered. He has a lot of access to the information. He has access to your competition. He has access to your past historical data, how you have done, right? And you got to be able to leverage all of this to your advantage.
Right, right, right. No, it's a great point. I mean, it's you see these charts about how people are buying now, and it's a very complicated flow chart. It's not that traditional funnel that marketers used to think about. It's, they looked on LinkedIn here, like you said, they're looking at a marketplace here. You want to make sure you're telling a consistent, compelling story across all these channels, which is making marketing's job more challenging, but more fun, I think.
Yep, yep, absolutely, absolutely.
Is there anything based on your experience that kind of surprised you? You read in a marketing textbook that this is what you should do, but is there any sort of unconventional wisdom you've learned through your experience?
Well, I think, as I said, one thing I've learned, and I've learned this firsthand, right? So a lot of startups or a lot of founders, uh, they actually build a great product, right?
Right,
And they have gone through, I mean, one of the startups I was part of, right? So great founding team, right? They were disruptive throughout their career, right? In big companies, right? And very disruptive product by itself, right? Really
right,
solid, right? But the fundamentals of business don't end there, right? It's really about how do you take this product to market, right? And a
right,
lot of the founders and really good technologists, they fail to understand. They think that, hey, this product is so good that it will just sell by itself, right?
right,
Yeah, and that never happens,
right,
right? So, I mean, you would think intuitively that, hey, I have done my work, I know my product market fit, I know the problem statement, I know the buyer, but there has to be mechanisms as to how to reach that buyer, how to convince that buyer, right? And really convert that into a sale, right? And
right,
what are going to be your routes to market, right? Those are absolutely important fundamentals. So I think that's one thing I would say, right, was very non-intuitive,
right, yeah,
right? That you got to experience firsthand to know
right.
that idea.
I think it's interesting. I mean, we run into this through our business. Um, is that a lot of times, like we'll see instances where the company has grown just by on the founder's passion and knowledge, and if the founder is able to sit down with the prospect, he or she knows so much about it, they're able to convince the person like this is the product I need, but it doesn't scale very effectively because that messaging and that knowledge just it's not conveyed. They don't put the time into the conveying like what's so critical about this. Sort of to your point earlier about like what problem is this specifically served. is it solving? And so I think that's a really it's an interesting point to say, like, how do we scale beyond just the founder's knowledge of the product, all the effort they put into that, and actually be able to scale a company to say this is this is going to survive and continue to thrive beyond just the founder sitting down in a prospect meeting.
Yep, absolutely, absolutely.
What so on a more personal level, have you had a chance to read any interesting books lately? I'm always
Yeah, so
asking this
interesting you
question.
asked, right? So I mean, typically, it's been life in startup is very busy, as you probably know, right? But with the downtime, right, with the new year, right, I did get a chance, right? So I think three or four kind of books which I always kind of they highlight, top highlights in my kind of everyday journey. So one is a book by the name of Tuned In, right? And
Okay.
that goes back to my earlier comment about knowing your customer intimately, right?
Mhm.
I mean, you just cannot have a business without, understanding the customer and consequently the market as well, right? So that's one book. Second book I recently read was Zero to One, right, by
Okay.
Peter Thiel, right? Very interesting book as to how you got to be able to innovate, right? And there's no point in becoming another producer of Apple, right?
Right.
Because that market is already taken, right?
Right.
So that was second. Third one was a book by the name of Traction, right, which
Okay.
talks about go-to-market strategies and channels and so on and so forth. And the book which is always close to my heart is Lean Startup, right, which talks about
Right. Yeah.
fast innovating and fast failing. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So I think I kind of again revived some of those books, right? Some of those books are already always in my memory, right? And always I use them as a North Star,
Right.
right? My journey. Yeah.
No, that was good. I need to go back and reread Lean Startup and definitely take a look at those others too. But Lean Startup, I mean, it was so the thinking behind it was just terrific and definitely influenced me as well. So I'm glad you brought that up. When I hate when I sit down on my Audible account, I'm trying to think what book should I read, and now you gave me a few that I won't waste time just searching for a book to read. So that's terrific.
Well, yeah, I'm glad.
And
Yeah.
then finally, I read your article on the 2024 predictions, which was very interesting. I didn't know if you wanted to add any commentary or share a little bit about that. And I'll post a link in the notes of this interview because it's really I thought the predictions were definitely something that were unique and I thought would be very interesting to a lot of people. And so if you want to share any insights on that, that'd be terrific.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that you taking the time, right? So certainly, I mean, I've gotten into this habit of doing predictions, right? And not for anything, but really, getting a pulse on the market, right? Understanding what are the big market trends and are you moving in the right direction? Do you need any course corrections and so on and so forth, right? So yeah, I recently I evaluated my actually 2023 predictions as well, right? It's important to find out your hits and misses, but then also did 2024. And I'll quickly summarize them for your audience, right? So the first trend I see is data and AI, right? So there's going to be, I mean, in between there was, this uh, distributed nature of things, right? So applications, systems had, and they will continue to be get distributed. But from a data perspective, and particularly for Gen AI, it's important to create that knowledge corpus, right? And that knowledge corpus you can only create when you consolidate that data, right? So we see that as an upcoming trend that there are going to be various technological, approaches to doing that, right? That's one trend I think. The second is, the rise of what we call, the modern data stack, right? So obviously, the data is at the heart of everything we do with AI, and for that matter, any analytics, right? And how do you derive value, not just from historical data, but also from the streaming data, right? And there are going to be approaches, right? So I have a feeling about what approach would basically kind of garner more traction, right? Feel free to read that in my predictions, right? So that's the second prediction I had. The third prediction is around the rise of Gen AI itself, right? So Gen AI has progressed, but there are a lot of improvements which are going to happen, right? So Gen AI, at the heart of Gen AI is what we call LLMs, right? Large language models, right? And there's a reason why it was called as a large language model, right? Because it was based on text. But more importantly, now you'll see the advent of multimodal AI. That means, you can apply the same Gen AI concepts to audio, video, right? And
Okay.
number of other data types, right? So that's going to be, again, very, very prevalent, right? And there are different approaches as to how you create that context for Gen AI, which is going to be extremely important, right? It's not just enough to leverage an Gen AI model, which is trained off of internet. It
Right.
needs to know what you're doing and what your data is and what your problems are in order to solve them. So that's kind of the third trend. The fourth trend is, I think, significant, you know, kind of advent of AIOps, right? So with all of this complexity involved with data, distributed systems, and distributed applications, obviously AI is going to be, paramount to be able to, manage all of these things, right? So we predict the rise of AIOps, observability, right? And Gen AI, right? So these are technologies from an IT operations perspective becoming obviously paramount. My fifth was around, FinOps. So everything you do in IT operations needs to have financial accountability, right?
Right.
And that helps you to build a business case to your CXOs and, higher authorities and so on. FinOps and sustainability, right? And ESG, what the industry calls, environmental, social, and governance. So these are just not fads, right? They're not going to go away, right? So they are becoming more and more prominent, right? And then the visibility is growing all the way in the boardrooms and at the CXO levels, right? And then finally, the rise of industry clouds, right? So these are clouds which are not generic, they're very specific. There's a healthcare cloud, there's a fintech cloud, right? And then how do you operationalize it, right? So anyway, making long story short, those were my six predictions, right? And certainly your audience, if anybody's interested, feel free to read those. But I'll pause here. Did that make sense, Ben?
No, 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 that was terrific. And actually, I love that term. I hadn't heard it before of the data stack. I mean, we hear a lot about the technology stack, but the data stack, that's a really interesting concept about, and I'm guessing you feel free to share more on this, but it's the data that a company needs to have to operate effectively.
Absolutely, absolutely. And there are different elements of that, right? So it's not just one monolithic thing that, hey, you just take the data and then leverage AI on that, right? So there are multiple aspects to it, which feel free to read. There's a data fabric, there's a data platform, there is, the enrichment of that data, there is
Right.
visualization, there is orchestration. So all of these things need to happen for an effective Gen AI, output.
And one thing, I mean, since you know a lot about this, what's your recommendation for companies as and I've had other conversations and interviews about how they implement AI. I think there was some concern over, if they, based on that idea of democratization, like is it being implemented in a way I mean, effective is obviously important, but avoids any potential risk. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I mean that's precisely where this concept of localization comes into picture, right? So, Gen AI in particular, right? In order to be really effective, it needs to know your own data, right? And it needs to know the secrets of your business, right? Not the generic business. Okay, and that's going to be a big trend on how you leverage, these models, which are local. They're locally trained on your data, right? Without sacrificing uh, the data itself, right? And the security aspects and the breaches aspects and so on and so forth. So that's going to be a big trend going forward, what we call domain specific AI.
Okay. All right. Interesting. No, that's great. Great perspective. And actually this is my last question. So heading into 2024, do you have one piece of advice, one recommendation that businesses looking to grow that they should take action on first?
Yeah, no, I think one thing I would say is, again, going back to that, knowing your customer, right? Know your customer intimately and the market, right? And everything else kind of flows from there, right? Being able to understand his problems, right? How big of the problem it is, right? Is that generic enough problems that, hey, you can create, I mean, now you clearly see, community marketing becoming very prevalent, right? You formulate those communities where you're bringing together those personas which have a common set of problems, right? And that is how you would scale, the reach, the impact of what you're innovating and so on. So I would summarize it as knowing your customer extremely well.
Okay, perfect. That's great. That's great. Well, I definitely appreciate your time, Shailesh. I personally feel smarter. I don't know if I'm actually smarter, but I definitely, based on our conversation, feel smarter. I love the new terms that you introduced me to, which I'm very thankful for, and we'll definitely do additional research and new books to read, and definitely check out Shailesh's article on his 2024 predictions. I think everyone will find them very insightful and just give you new things to think about in this rapidly changing world. So we really appreciate your time.
Well, thank you so much, Ben. It was an absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me, and the conversation was very delightful. So thank you again, and looking forward to many more conversations with you.
Terrific, terrific. Well, thank you.